Grace and peace to you, from the one who was and is to come. Amen. At a climate summit in 2018, the scholar Heather Eaton looked at the intersection of religion and ecology. What struck me about her talk is the emphasis she put on reverence as a kind of catalyst able to engender responsibility. Wonder and awe lead to reverence, and reverence leads to responsibility. Reverence for and responsibility to the natural world are intimately connected to each other and to authentic religious experience. Last week's sermon on reforesting faith tried to once again awaken our wonder and awe about the life-giving role of trees for our planet Earth. It certainly instilled in me a renewed reverence for these faithful companions. According to Eaton, it is such reverence that leads to responsibility. Her reasoning is that reverence for the natural world is intimately connected to responsibility for the natural world. In other words, we will only care for what we revere, and it is only such combination of reverence and responsibility that makes our religious experience authentic. But the connection between reverence and responsibility does not just apply to the natural world. This week's celebration of Heritage Day reminds us that reverence and responsibility also apply to the rich cultural heritage that is meant to nurture social cohesion and strengthen our vision for a more just and equal society. Our Judeo-Christian tradition treasures the heritage of the Exodus story. It is recognized as an event of such importance that as a faith community we would not be the same without it. It continues to capture our imagination and illuminates our basic identity. It functions as a prism for interpreting not only all of Israel's subsequent history, but also the story of Jesus from Nazareth. The legacy of the Exodus keeps reminding us that God is the champion of the poor and oppressed, of all those pushed to the margins of life. God is known as the one who liberates people from the pharaohs of this world. God's liberating activity cannot be limited to internal change, but always pushes for societal change, transforming the external conditions of life. God's liberating activity has to be conceived in holistic terms, affecting change in all aspects of life, religious and political, social and individual. Like a stone dropped into a lake, stirring up small waves, the Exodus story intends to send ripples across time and history, forming ever-expanding circles of dignity that inspire reverence and responsibility. The artist Wassily Kandinsky saw the dot as a small circle from which everything starts. He kept exploring how dots can form circular designs. Part of his fascination with circles was their resemblance to the planets floating within the cosmos. It made him think that circles could represent aspects of spirituality which transcend the real world. He maintained that the circle is the synthesis of the greatest opposition. It combines the concentric and the eccentric in a single form and equilibrium. To him, circles were a symbol of progress, regeneration, and renewal, and he thought of abstract art as another way of expressing society's highest utopian ideals. In our Judeo-Christian tradition, it is the Exodus story that continues to inspire the highest ideals of freedom and justice. To treasure its heritage is meant to promote progress, societal regeneration, and renewal, no matter how utopian. But such hope is always anchored in a living relationship with the one known to be the source of all life and love. The Hebrew idiom used to describe such reverence for the God of the Exodus is the fear of the Lord. This term needs explanation. Fear of the Lord is a relational term and signifies Israel's grateful response to the God who hears the cries of the oppressed and reveals an undivided commitment to liberation from bondage. The kind of reverence expressed with fear of the Lord should therefore not be confused with the kind of angst and terror that is evoked by George Orwell's despotic Big Brother, known for his intimidations and desire for power and control. In the book of Deuteronomy, for example, the call to fear God is mentioned in connection with loving God, devoting oneself to God's commandments, or serving God. In other words, to fear God is to take the God of the Exodus with utmost seriousness. It is to pay attention to and honor God as the ultimate liberator and source of all life and love. Such fear of the Lord is not about the kind of fear that intimidates and paralyzes, but rather the kind of profound reverence and respect that offers ethical direction and orientation, summoning Israel and the Church to be responsive and creative, to help engender in societies a greater sense of justice in which all are able to enjoy the gift of freedom and share the gifts of their unique heritage. The story of the Exodus exercised a powerful hold also on the imagination of Israel's sages. As a foundational event, it shaped the identity and destiny of those to whom Israel's wisdom writings tried to offer counsel and advice. It inspired a liberation spirituality which had the well-being of the poor and oppressed at heart. This option for the poor was to be reflected in the laws and institutions that regulated Israel's life in community. It kept stirring resistance to domination and encouraged care for the most vulnerable. It was summoning those in power to set out social, economic, and political arrangements that would ensure a just and life-giving community. It led to the expression of beliefs, values, and practices that blocked the tendency to greed and selfishness and informed a covenantal way of being. It was the Exodus story that provided the motivation for Israel's sages to offer practical wisdom for dealing with everyday challenges and conflicts in a way that would create a human community free from domination and exploitation. This combination of reverence and responsibility also speaks to our celebrations of Heritage Day. What is the heritage that needs to be remembered and preserved? Are all the voices and histories given the same attention? How do they inform and inspire our hope for a more just and equal society? And does our Judeo-Christian heritage, centered around reverence for the God of the Exodus, have anything to say to the way we celebrate Heritage Day? This combination of reverence and responsibility features prominently in the book of Proverbs, one of Israel's well-known wisdom writings. What readers might not always be aware of is that in this compilation of wisdom sayings, we witness very different voices competing with each other. Center and margin are in contestation with each other, and a lot is at stake. For where there is no vision, the people perish. But according to Proverbs, such a vision has to be grounded in a persistent reverence and respect for the God of the Exodus. Such reverence has to be the starting point of any pursuit of knowledge worthy to be called wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The sages are convinced that such reverence and respect can be taught and practiced. It is praised as the very beginning of knowledge. The Hebrew word for beginning can also signify the most important part or the essence of something. In other words, all intellectual pursuits for knowledge and understanding are to be grounded in a relationship of reverence and respect for the God known to seek liberation and freedom for all. Israel's sages insist that this combination of reverence and responsibility permeates every area of daily life. For every aspect of human life is somehow touched by the divine, and every action becomes a way of relating to God. This is poignantly illustrated by the way the wisdom sayings and instructions of the book of Proverbs touch on almost every aspect of human experience. For divine wisdom must encompass all of human life. The Old Testament scholar Gerhard von Rath considers this to be a unique contribution of Israel's wisdom writings. It was perhaps Israel's greatness that she did not keep faith and knowledge apart. The experiences of the world were for her always divine experiences as well, and the experiences of God were for her experiences of the world. Experiences matter. They too are a place of divine revelation. They are to be taken seriously and to be reflected on. They provide the insights that help broaden the basis of the kind of knowledge that promotes a just and peaceful society. And such knowledge has to be always grounded in reverence and respect for the God who seeks liberation and freedom for all. Such grounding helps us to harvest the kind of knowledge that remains sensitive to those voices who cry freedom. Knowledge born of reverence does not impose or silence other voices and experiences. It rather values everyone's experience as an important criterion for determining society's response. Everyone's experience holds validity and authority. Such knowledge resists the argument of common sense, to which the majority or dominant minority appeals to legitimate their construction of reality. Such knowledge does not marginalize and discriminate on the basis of age, class, gender, or race. Such knowledge always remembers and preserves the important landmarks that have guided and shaped a people's history and identity. Do not move an ancient landmark set up by your ancestors. Knowledge inspired by reverence values and amplifies the experiences and insights of previous generations and does not limit itself to one's own tradition and culture. Israel's sages were not afraid to include the wisdom and insight from other nations and cultures. Biblical wisdom is international, multicultural, and even multi-religious. It assigns renewed validity and authority to the cultural heritage of indigenous people, which dominant cultures tend to marginalize and threaten to silence. The indigenous knowledge is based on their own heritage and unique experience of the world. And these experiences matter if the starting point for knowledge is reverence for the God committed to liberation and freedom, and there is an existential urgency. Israel's sages remind us that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. The urgency to give validity and authority, especially to the voices and experiences of the marginalized, shaped the tremendous efforts of Israel wisdom writers. Their work started while Israel was still processing the hardship of exile and alienation. They had experienced what it means to be no longer in control of their own history. They had to resist imperial rule and the pressures toward assimilation. The pressure was relentless and continued with the Greek Hellenization program, which controlled and shaped the markets of the ancient world toward a global culture, not unlike today's age of globalization, driven by a global capitalist economy that does not tolerate diversity and deviation. Israel's sages had to devise strategies for survival and resistance to keep their own tradition alive and preserve its ideals and values. Reverence for the God of the Exodus enabled them to remain responsive to their own experience and harvest the kind of knowledge that would inspire the ongoing pursuit of the path to freedom. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. The sage's strategies for survival and resistance also always aim at people's personal liberation. This is why many of the sayings address the psychic sources of personal and societal bondage: greed, lust, or inordinate pride and aggressiveness. Wisdom is meant to motivate and educate the individual in the virtues that lead to life, a fullness of life that knows about the value of compassion, humility, gratitude, diligence, honesty, and loyalty. The question is, how can one deal successfully and fairly with family, friends, business partners, civil leaders, the young, the elderly, the stranger, and even the fool? And how do we define success and fairness? Such personal liberation is meant to empower members of a society to be free, not from others, but for others, committed to work for and support structures and institutions that aim at socio-economic and political liberation, fostering justice and fairness among all its members. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. In discerning the values and beliefs that inform and guide the counsel of these sages, we are able to get a glimpse of what wisdom's spirituality is about. It is needed to navigate the gray areas of daily life. Not everything can be safeguarded by commandments. There are constant decisions to be made in daily life that call for the kind of knowledge that becomes wisdom when inspired by reverence for the God of the Exodus. Such wisdom is needed to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong, what serves life and what destroys it. Such wisdom is aware of a divine presence that inspires reverence in the midst of all the busyness and empowers one to take responsibility. The Old Testament scholar Norman Gottwald explains how, for wisdom, the sphere of the world is as broad as everything that may be encountered in the natural environment: historical events, social relations, political order, family affairs, daily work, and religious belief and practice. Israel's sages managed to bring to speech a wide range of lived experience. They do so in a number of genres with a variety of rhetorical devices drawing on the rich wisdom that emerges from individual and communal reflection upon lived experience. We sense a literary freedom of ideas that try to be responsive to the existential realities of life. The sage's testimony does not shy away from the asymmetries of life, allowing for multiple, even contradictory perspectives. But by being an open source book, Proverbs also risks presenting us with voices and perspectives that are at times in competition with each other. These competing voices emerge from three primary spheres of individual experience, reflecting a particular socio-historical setting. There is the experience and wisdom of the family tribe, the scribal legal schools, the advisors of the royal courts. Depending on which section one is reading of the book of Proverbs, one will notice that some voices are silenced while others are amplified. We can notice what Rob Stegman described as a deep tension between localized and centralized wisdom. It matters who is speaking. Is it a scribe, a royal advisor, or an ordinary citizen? And where does the power lie to censor or silence dissident wisdom? As readers, we need to be on guard. What role did the editors of this compilation of wisdom sayings play? Did they use their ideological freedom in turning up the volume of certain voices? Some would argue that the dominant voices are those of the scribal legal school and the royal court. Their concern is to cultivate a pedestrian ethic of obedience to superiors, or the refinement of proper court manners. We hear their voice in sayings that reinforce society's hierarchies and promote patriarchy. Some sayings smack of misogyny, encourage corporal punishment, degrade the poor, or try to justify inequality. But we need to credit the editors of Proverbs for not only including these dominant voices coming from the center. The marginal voices of dissident wisdom are not simply excluded. The experiences and observations at the margin keep contesting the more dogmatic and authoritarian voices of the center, who claim that their wealth is a divine blessing for being righteous. For where does this leave the poor? Marcus Borg notes, though none of the sayings directly blames the poor for their poverty, the frequent association of prosperity with wisdom, diligence, industry, and prudence, and of poverty with foolishness, laziness, and drunkenness comes close. The lazy person is one of the villains of Proverbs. But the marginal voices keep challenging the kind of rigid dogmatism that assumes that the rich and the poor each deserve their fortune. In fact, some sayings in Proverbs present us with a counter-testimony that raises the issue of injustice. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. What becomes clear is that social location matters. It shapes our view of the world. The scholar Miguel de la Torre therefore offers an important advice to the reader of Proverbs and the Bible in general. When we read the Bible, we read it from our social location, a reading that usually justifies our lifestyle, even if at times our lifestyle contradicts the very essence of the gospel message. This is echoed in the multiple voices within Israel's wisdom tradition. They reflect a contestation of power between the center and the margin, between competing views of reality as represented by royal court, scribal legal schools, and local wisdom. In his book Circles of Dignity, James Cochrane highlights the importance of such local wisdom, of starting with the lived experience of communities and of including interpretations of sacred texts from the margin. He's adamant that local wisdom has something unique to offer to the theological enterprise. As a faith community, we are summoned to take a step away from the comfort of the center and release our monopoly on truth. The theological openness and flexibility of ancient Israel's wisdom tradition models a dialogical approach where all the voices are heard, including those at the fringes of society. How can we as a faith community embody a similar openness and flexibility and learn to speak of lived experience in reference to God? Israel wisdom's tradition beautifully affirms that human experience in all its diversity and messiness is experienced before God and with reverence to God. It creates space for competing voices challenging the seduction of certitudes and hegemonic tendencies. The book of Job and of Ecclesiastes illustrate this. Reverence for the God of the Exodus inspires responsible interpretation and engagement. To despise the instruction and wisdom of such reverence is to act like a fool. Like a dog that returns to its vomit, as a fool who reverts to folly. Wisdom, by contrast, is about the skill or ability to steer or navigate with success the voyage through life. In Proverbs, such wisdom becomes a fountain of life, which inspires trust and humility. It offers comfort and instills resilience. What emerges from Proverbs' distilled knowledge is that reverence for the God of the Exodus has the potential to change our understanding of self. It can make us less selfish and more generous. It can help us to become more perceptive and receptive of new truths that go beyond our familiar categories. It can empower us to see ourselves as being part of a much bigger and greater story of liberation that started with the Exodus and continues to permeate our daily lives. Such reverence is indeed the beginning of wisdom, and inspired the kind of wisdom we see in Jesus' preaching and teaching. For Jesus' wisdom was certainly coming from the margins and not the center. It is in the book of Jesus Sirach, another wisdom writing, which belongs to the collection of ancient books scholars refer to as the Apocrypha, that we encounter an exuberant praise of such reverence for the God of the Exodus. Fear of the Lord is a paradise of blessing, a better protection than the highest reputation. Reverence and respect is compared to a paradise of blessing. It is seen to be better than a kind of protective canopy of esteemed reputation usually only enjoyed by royalty in ancient times. May such wisdom be the protective canopy of both our religious and cultural heritage, empowering us to hear the voices of localized wisdom coming from the margins. And may we do it with the kind of reverence that inspires responsibility. And so on this Heritage Day, deep peace of the rolling waves to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, and deep peace of the Son of Peace to you. Amen.